The purpose of this roundtable was to discuss the process of the ex post evaluation of transport, investment and policies. In other words, looking at what has happened during the delivery of a project and once it has been completed. A lot of research and effort goes into the appraisal of transport projects. In other words, trying to work out before a project is delivered and built what it might deliver. And the ITF, along with other organisations, has done a lot of research into how people value the benefits of transport infrastructure. But this was rather different. This was about what actually happens when a transport scheme has been delivered. We decided there were a number of reasons for carrying out ex post evaluation of transport schemes. The first was to evaluate a scheme during the process of delivering the scheme. In other words, while a scheme is being procured, while it's being financed and funded, and while it is being built. There's an audit process here to make sure that the project remains broadly on track, to understand if there are any cost overruns likely to occur, and to take action to try and mitigate those undesirable effects. We had a presentation from the UK's National Audit Office about the role they fulfil in auditing the projects that the Department for Transport is delivering over the building of those projects. In other words, understanding what is happening to costs, whether it looks likely that projects are going to be delayed, and what mitigating actions the Audit Office can recommend that the department takes. So we concluded that this audit process is a valuable resource for government departments delivering transport schemes, and that other countries might want to follow the line that the UK takes in its Public Accounts Committee and National Audit Office. We wondered also whether transport departments might make more of an effort to anticipate the sorts of questions the National Audit Office asks when projects start to go off track. Then the second area we covered was that of whether transport projects, when they're delivered, actually deliver the outputs that were expected of them. What actually happened when the scheme was built? We decided that it was necessary, first of all, to define the objectives of the transport scheme. One of the issues we discussed was the difference between the transport appraisal process and ministers' objectives for transport projects. The appraisal process only really values the first round effects of a transport scheme, the travel time savings, the improvements in safety, the reduction in carbon emissions, improvements in reliability, reductions in crowding on public transport, all of these sorts of things. But the appraisal process doesn't really try to estimate what the effects on economic development are, whether those are in terms of increased output per person or more jobs in the area of interest. Evaluation can cover all of those things. Indeed, evaluation usually does look at the development impacts of transport schemes. And we were given examples that occur from a big database collected in the United States, and we were also given examples of French transport schemes that were monitored through their observatories. One of the issues about understanding the impact of transport schemes is digging down into really whether the transport scheme has caused these economic development impacts, or whether perhaps the effects would have happened anyhow. There was quite a lot of debate about different ways of understanding causation. On the one hand, the American schemes we looked at were based on case studies, examples of transport schemes that had been implemented, big database, a large sample of schemes. And there, causation was established by asking people, asking businesses and firms in the area what they felt had contributed towards the economic development impacts observed in the studies. Was it the transport scheme? Was it other factors that were having an influence? We also discussed what we might describe more scientific ways of understanding causation, and whether these were best addressed by trying to redo the cost-benefit analysis to understand whether the travel time savings, the reductions in crowding and these sort of things had actually been delivered by the scheme or not, or whether there were other ways of looking at it using what are described as causal inference models, which try and identify those effects which make it difficult to understand what is happening, to try and identify those effects and work out the extent to which it's the transport scheme that's been responsible for delivering the observed changes. So we concluded that there were merits in encouraging countries to use the audit approach adopted by the UK in order to monitor projects during the development and delivery of the project. We also thought that the case studies approach was a useful way of giving further colour to the delivery of economic benefits that transport schemes can do, and to help policymakers and the public understand the sorts of outputs they might expect from a transport project. We also recommended that this more scientific approach should be applied to transport schemes to try and understand cause and effect. While the methods are applicable to all schemes and policies, we recognise that the conclusions from looking at any particular set of schemes or policies are very specific to those particular examples and cannot necessarily, indeed cannot generally, be applied to other schemes without those schemes being studied themselves.